Hi, my name is Erin Shade Hickox, but mostly I go by Erin Shade because it's easier and it sounds cooler. I'm making this video today because there's something really important that I have to do, and I'm going to need all the help I can get. But before I can tell you what this thing is and how you could maybe help me, I have to tell you my story. It's the story of how I met Joss Whedon, and my life was changed forever. This is a very personal story for me, and so it would really mean a lot if you watch this video, that you listen with an open mind and heart, and that you hear me out until the very end. For reasons that will become incredibly obvious very quickly, I really don't want to actually make this video at all, but I know that if I do, I can transform this world. And so can you. Okay, since I'm not very well known to many people out there, I kind of have to start at the beginning for some background information about me. I'm from this place, Villanova, Pennsylvania. It's in this area known as the Main Line of Philadelphia, where all of the super well-to-do rich people live. And I'm the oldest of three sisters who I love very much. And my dad worked predominantly in the Texas oil industry when I was growing up. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and also a very impressive knitter. I definitely grew up in a very privileged life. In fact, my parents never let me forget it because they didn't really grow up in this kind of wealth. So they were constantly, reminding us that we were very lucky and privileged to be living this lifestyle. This lifestyle included me attending an all-girls school for 13 years, the Agnes Irwin School, living in a very beautiful large house in this nice neighborhood, and pretty much having, every opportunity that a person could have, growing up in such an environment. We also had a Cocker Spaniel named Aggie. Okay. I'm very grateful that I had these privileges growing up. I definitely don't take them for granted. But my home was also a very conservative home. And I was always kind of afraid of breaking the rules and making my parents mad and everything. And they were very Republican leaning people. So Fox News is on 24/7. I knew all those Fox News guys, different hosts and everything. They were always on in our house. And my dad worked in Texas a lot. He was a CEO of a oil company in Texas for a large portion of my childhood. And so he was still, he knew a lot of the Texas oil people. He lives there now and everything. And I remember his best friend actually worked in the Bush administration, and we even once got a private tour of the White House, which was pretty crazy. I remember standing in the Oval Office and feeling I really just did not belong there. I was definitely the weird one growing up, and my parents didn't really know quite what to make of me. I had a very wild and vivid imagination, and I very early on cultivated a variety of incredibly niche but intense obsessions. For a while when I was really young, I secretly was convinced that I was living in a computer game, and I was obsessed with nature and watching cartoons and wishing I could be in a cartoon. My childhood bedroom was painted as a rainforest with animals, and my all-time favorite cartoon growing up was Sailor Moon. I often wished that I could be a Sailor Senshi and save the world just like her. It made me want to learn Japanese too, and after years of begging my parents, I convinced them to pay for private tutoring in Japanese on the weekends. I listened to Japanese pop music almost exclusively, as well as trance, and my all-time favorite pop star was Ayumi Hamasaki, and still is. She's the best. I was also obsessed with UFOs. I felt like extraterrestrial life was so out there, and that the government knew all about it, and that they were keeping it a secret, and they were keeping the free energy technology a secret. And, I don't really even know how I got into all of this stuff, but I was just very early on very obsessed with it, and I became kind of confused. Like, I didn't understand why my dad worked in the oil industry when there were clearly these like UFOs that were flying around and they were not running on petroleum. Um, and I would tell this to my dad and I'd be like, hey, like, why don't you like look into that stuff instead? But he kind of just dismissed me. I mean, I think most people would though. Like, I'm not like knocking him or anything, but I think people just sort of thought that it was a weird thing to be into. But honestly, all of that just kind of made me want to learn even more. So I learned a lot about UFOs as a child. Like, by high school, this research became one of my hobbies. But overall, my main obsession was still TV. When I was 15, I had this thought one day in October when I was 15. And the thought was I needed to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And so I borrowed my friend's DVDs because this was like before streaming was a thing, obviously. And I binged the entire series in a month. And I was hooked immediately. Like, I was sold by like episode 1. There was something about the writing that really drew me in. And I'd always loved writing and I'd always loved TV, but for whatever reason, I just hadn't put like 2 and 2 together. I hadn't thought like I should be a TV writer. But then when I saw Buffy, I was like, I have to be a TV writer. And so from that moment on, everything I did was in the singular pursuit of this goal. I had to be a TV writer or else there was nothing else I could do with my life. So upon coming to this conclusion that my destiny was to become a TV writer and I had to do anything I could to make this happen, I researched all the ways that people could become TV writers, like how to do it. And I quickly learned that the tried and true method of becoming a TV writer was to become an assistant first. So I rewatched Buffy a zillion times, and I, throughout this whole time, as I was going through high school, kept thinking, how cool would it be to be an assistant on a Joss Whedon TV show? I worked really hard to, make it through high school. That's the part where you do homework. But I worked in a movie theater so I could watch more movies. I, watched a ton of TV, telling myself it was like really important that I did that so I could be really good at knowing how to make TV. My parents were like, really questioning if this was like gonna pan out for me. Like, they weren't really super confident that I had the chops to make it into any film schools, but I was dedicated, and I in my senior year of high school, I applied to USC Film School, which was my dream to get into. It's like the #1 film school in the world, and the screenwriting program was like really exclusive, so I was really nervous. I wasn't sure I was going to get in, but I got in, and it was like one of the happiest moments of my life. I'll never forget. My friend was over and we were playing Nintendo, and I saw the mailman come, and I like raced out and I got the packet, and I saw it was big, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I got in, and we were jumping up and down, and I just knew that it was a sign that my dreams like were actually possible, that I really could become a TV writer. And my parents were, again, they were really shocked, and they were like, how'd you do this? All you've been doing is watching TV and like researching UFOs or whatever. And our relationship had been like kind of tense in high school for a variety of reasons. And, I had been in a lot of therapy because I was like so depressed and stuff. But, when I got into USC, I was like, yeah, things are turning up roses for me. Like, I'm ready to like begin my new life. So in 2008, I moved to LA to matriculate into USC Film School, and by the second semester, I was already interning because I was very ambitious, and I just like wanted to hit the ground running because I was like, okay, if I'm going to be a Hollywood assistant, I have to start interning now, right away, so that by the time I graduate, I can like seamlessly transition into my Hollywood assistant career, which will then become my TV writer career. So this is the plan. It was like a very like long-term plan I had. And one day, this was in 2009 when I was interning in Hollywood, I saw that Paley Fest was going to be happening, and I was like, and like right down the street, like at the Cinerama Dome, and I like didn't know LA that well, but like I worked so close by that I was like, oh, I know where that is. I can go to it. Like I want to go to all these panels. Like how cool. I was in like my peak, film school nerd form. And I was like going through all the different panels that were going to be there. And I saw that Dollhouse was going to be one of them. And I was like, oh, bomb. Like I could go to this and like see Joss Whedon in person. Like that would be really cool. And, hear him talk about like the art or whatever. And so I bought tickets and I went on my own. And I don't remember much about the panel. I don't remember anything about it. But I do remember what happened after. And I remember I was in the second row. I was like really close to the stage. And when the panel was over, everyone like made a mad dash for the stage with like posters and like shirts and like other things that they wanted signed by like the cast and Joss and everything. And I was like, oh, wow, like, I didn't know this was, like, this kind of thing. Like, I was just here because I'm, like, a nerd wanting to know about the process. But, so I was, like, kind of watching this all happen. Like, I'd never been to a Comic-Con or anything like that. Like, I was just kind of, like, a little quiet, like, closeted, in a hermit mode person. But, when I saw everyone else going up there, I was like, oh, maybe, like, I should approach him and tell him how much his work meant to me or something. I don't know. It just popped into my mind and maybe is something I should do. But before I could like make a decision either way, for the first time in my life, I heard this voice in the back of my head. It like popped kind of out of nowhere. And it was like my voice, but like not my voice. Like it felt like it just wasn't. It just popped in and it like didn't belong to me. And it said, not yet. And I was like, okay. So I just like turned around and left. You guys, like I had never had anything like that happen before, but for whatever reason, I was just like, oh, I should just listen to this voice, my inner knowing or something. And just like maybe one day I'll meet him for real and like it'll be something else. So I left. And flash forward 3 years, several nervous breakdowns and depressive episodes later, I managed to graduate USC Film School. And I graduated with distinction. My thesis was award distinction, which was really cool because my GPA was horrible. I bombed like so many classes. But I was so happy to have gotten honored for my thesis project. And I also managed to parlay my part-time office PA job at a production company into a full-time office PA job at a production company. So I had managed to succeed in my goal that I had at the beginning of USC, which was to graduate with an assistant job. Now, this job wasn't on a TV show, but I was like, well, it's a production company and they make a lot of cool stuff, and this seems like a really great landing place for me. And it was on the Universal Studios backlot, and, everyone was super nice. And a couple months into the summer, this is in 2012, I heard on the grapevine of assistant stuff that a new job opportunity had popped up. And it was for Joss Whedon. He needed a second assistant. And this was like right after Avengers had come out, like literally Avengers had come out like 2 or 3 months before this happened. And so like, as I'm sure many people remember, this was when people liked Joss Whedon. People like Avengers was so amazing. Like everyone loved it. It was the top grossing movie ever and everything. and he was like riding his career high. And even I had seen it, and like, I mean, I had seen some Marvel movies because I had worked at movie theaters and stuff, and I saw Avengers because I knew Joss had done it, but I was really not well versed in Marvel like before any of that. But he needed a second assistant, and I actually didn't think I was qualified for this job. Someone at my work actually had to like convince me to apply. I was like, I don't know. Like, I just graduated college. Like, I don't think can do this. And she was like, what are you talking about? Like, give me your resume. I'm going to send it to my fiance, and then he will give it to his boss, and you will get in. And I was like, okay. So the next thing I know, I wind up getting called to have an interview, a first interview with Joss's assistant, his first assistant. And I guess I did well in that because I was called back to interview for the final round of 4 people at Marvel Studios with Joss himself. And so on August 24th, 2012, I drove to the Marvel Studios offices in Manhattan Beach to meet him. I remember as I was driving over there, I had like gotten a blowout. I had like worn my favorite blazer because I like wore blazers back then. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like I'm only like 3 months out of college and I'm about to go interview with Joss Whedon. Like I could hardly believe it was even happening. And I was so nervous, and I got there like 45 minutes early because I was afraid of being late because I was working in Universal Studios and I had to like go all the way to Manhattan Beach. And but when I got there, I was like sitting in the waiting room and I was like befriending one of the other candidates for the job. And finally I was called to go into his office. And I remember as soon as I walked in, it was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Like I was just so surprised, like that he was so depressed. He was so, there was just heavy depression energy all over him. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I guess I just had expected that, you know, it would be a more like upbeat interview, given that like he had just had all this success with Avengers and stuff. But I quickly learned that he had just separated from his wife and that he had just moved into his own new house. And so I was like, oh gosh, like this is, you know, so stressful and sad. Like he just seemed really sad. And I realized that like, I guess you can be really successful in your career and also have your personal life implode at the same time. Anyway, but still he was like super nice and like really kind, and we had like a really nice chat. And I remember he had told me that he had just gotten back from Japan and that he had gone to the Ghibli Museum. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I love Japan. Like I studied abroad there. Like I studied Japanese and I love anime and everything. And I forget what else we talked about, but I mean, I feel like we vibed. We vibed pretty well despite him kind of being like, I think, sad and stressed. And I remember at the end of the interview, as I was leaving, I was like, I turned to him and I was like, everything's going to be okay. And then I walked back to my car and I was just like, okay, that was so fucking weird. Like I didn't know what to make of it at all. And I was like, well, at least you did this. Like I can be proud, like having gotten to this point, like after everything, being 15 and like having this dream and then like making it at age 22, like to that moment. Like, I don't know. I just was like, I can be happy no matter what happens. That being said, I wanted a job. And I waited very impatiently, and the following Monday, I got a call from his assistant, and he was like, hey, so unfortunately, you didn't get the job, but Joss really liked you, and he thinks that maybe you'd be a really good fit for this new TV show that we're developing for Marvel. And it would be more of like a TV writer's room job. Like, would you be interested in that? And I was like, yeah, yes. I was like, yes, like, of course. Like, oh, that's even better than being someone's personal assistant. I was like, somehow I failed upwards. Like, I don't know how I did it, but I was like, this is even better than before. So I was like, yes, of course. Like, I'd love to interview. And so, maybe it was a couple weeks later, and a couple weeks later, I guess it was, and I wound up in Santa Monica to interview with the 3 showrunners of this new Marvel TV show. Their names are Jed Whedon, Joss's brother, Marissa Tancherone, and Jeff Bell. And the idea was that Joss was going to help them like co-create this show, and then he was going to leave, and then they would be the three showrunners working on it. And I guess I did well in that interview because I got hired to be writer's PA on this new show. And this new show would soon become Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., codename Ragtag. And at first, it was a very select, small group of people. It was just, me, the writer's assistant, Jed, Marissa, Jeff, Joss, and then, some of the Marvel executives. But then, as the weeks and months went on, the show developed more. The cast came in, another EP, and the whole production team, and quickly it became this like huge family of like hundreds of people, all working on this pilot. And this was like an ABC, like Disney synergy, Marvel synergy thing, so it had like a kind of atypical development process. And by this point, I could not believe my luck. I was like, how did I do this? Like, it's almost working too perfectly. I was like beginning to wonder, like, I don't know how I did this. Like, it was so surreal. And it was like I was getting, a personalized crash course in how TV was made. And I remember, like, whenever I was out driving to go, like, pick up the lunch order or, like, do something, like, at the petty cash or whatever, I would, like, blast trance music, and, like, I would feel like I was, like, in a badass, like, movie or video game or something. And I was just, like, like, all the way, like, all across town driving. And it was an exciting adventure for me. And in January and February 2013, we shot the pilot with Joss directing. And again, like, the plan was that he would help make this pilot for ABC, and then he would, like, get back to working on the Avengers sequel movie, which was gearing up to begin production in London later that year. And in early May, the show was picked up, and I was promoted to showrunner's assistant to Jed and Marissa, and aka JMO. And I was so excited to be promoted. I really, really, again, I was a very ambitious person, and I knew I was very green and new, and so were they. It was their first showrunning job. But I, like, really, I was very impatient. I just, like, wanted to, like, keep ascending up the ladder. So I was, like, so excited that they agreed to make me their assistant. And I was a little intimidated, but I resolved to do my best so that eventually I could make it into the writer's room for real. And one day at work, around this time, we were preparing to move offices from Santa Monica to Culver City, and I got a text from Joss. And he said that he was on his major deadline for this Avengers sequel script thing that he was working on. And he was wondering if I would be free that weekend to basically like watch him like a hawk while he was like made to finish it, basically, on time. And, like, and check for typos and things like that, and just kind of be like, a little bit like a babysitter for him to like make him do his job a little bit. And he offered me $2,500 to do this for him. And I of course was like, oh my gosh, like, of course I will do this. Like, I'm happy to. Like, I said yes before he even talked about the money. Like, I thought it sounded really cool. And his other assistants were so busy preparing for the big move to London and stuff. And, I was already vetted by the Marvel security forces. So, like, they knew that I was, like, not going to, like, leak their shit. And, so it was like, I was like a natural backup for such a job. And so I didn't think that there was anything weird about it. And also, one of the Marvel executives on the movie was set to join him on one of the days. And so, like, he knew I was going to be there and everything. So, again, I just, like, didn't think that it was anything untoward. So I was like, yes, of course. And, I, of course, had no weekend plans anyway because I was a hermit. And so I became very excited that this is going to be my weekend. Also, side note, $2,500 was more money than I made in a month on that assistant job. So I was like, sweet, extra cash for me. The only caveat was that he asked me to keep this a secret from Jed and Marissa. He said something about how they had helped him on the last one, and they were so busy right now with the show and everything with the show, and like he didn't want to make them feel weird that he was asking me. And I believed this, and so I promised him, I was like, of course, like, I'll keep it between you and me. It's just, I don't want to like mess anything up. So on May 11th, 2013, I showed up at Joss's house with his signature English breakfast tea and some things that he asked me to pick up from the store. And I mostly kept to myself, like on my computer, just like surfing the internet or whatever, while he worked. And I was super shy and nervous. But at the same time, my imagination was running more wild than usual because he was blasting all of this like cinematic film score in the background. And so I just kept having these like daydreams pop into my head. Like, I kept seeing this one over and over again. It was like me walking up to his door looking very concerned, and like all of these UFOs were like flying overhead. And I was like, wow, Erin, like, you are actually like on a bit of a trip today, like more than usual. But I was just so excited to be there, and it was such an experience. And he was really nice, and he made a lot of progress in the script. And on Sunday night, after everything was done, he was so happy to have made his deadline and thanked me profusely for my help. And I was like, I didn't really do anything, but like, okay, sure, you're welcome. And he was like, no, you really helped me, and can I take you to dinner? And I was like, sure, yeah. Like, yeah. So he takes me to like this super nice dinner, and we have a really fun time, and we're just like chatting, and I could like hardly believe it was even happening. And on our walk back to his place, we were just chatting about life, and we basically just like became friends. And over the next several weeks, we began like exchanging more texts all the time, and our friendship grew. And then one night, towards the end of June, I was sitting in my new apartment that I had just moved into with like my two BFFs, and they were out that night because they had lives, unlike me. And I was planning on a night in, per usual, and on my own, when I got a text from Joss, and he asked me if I wanted to come over and watch a movie. And I was like, sure, yeah. But as I was driving over there, I was like, we are friends, but I also kind of feel like something could happen, and maybe I'm making a huge mistake, but like, he's so kind and funny, and I feel like we really vibe, and maybe I'm just being paranoid. I don't know. Like, we are just friends. Like, everything's gonna be totally fine. It'll be fine. Everything's normal. We're just gonna watch a movie. It's just a movie. So I get over there and we smoke some weed and we sit on this like red velvet couch thing and we watch this movie, The Grey, starring Liam Neeson. And it's like a really intense, dark movie. I don't know if you've seen The Grey. It's like really, really raw and real. And then after it was over, Joss was like, hey, do you want to watch another movie? And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it. And so we watched some other movie. It was like the complete opposite of The Grey. It was some 3D animated movie. I don't even remember what it was, or what even happened in the movie, because within the first 45 minutes in, I felt him hold my hand. And I felt my heart leap into my chest. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm holding Joss's hand, like, am I developing a crush? Like, what am I doing? But then, you know, by the end of the movie, he like took the hand away from my hand, and since there were no hands, you know, at the end, so we just didn't talk about it. We just like pretended that it didn't happen. And he was like, thank you so much for coming over. I had such a fun time. I was like, me too. And then I left. And as I was driving home, I was like, my mind was going crazy. I was like having a little panic attack. And I was like, Erin, you can't have a crush on Joss. Like, this is crazy. What are you doing? But then the other part of me was like, Erin, you've never had a crush before on anyone, and you've never had a boyfriend before or anything, and so you should indulge this, and you should do so for the sake of love and destiny. And I was like, ah! Anyway, the next thing I know, Joss and I are secretly dating. And Jed and Marissa still had no idea that we were even friends. The weight of the secrecy was heavy and incredibly anxiety-inducing. I faced such conflict in every waking moment of my life at work. But at the same time, I cherished my time with Joss so much. We saw movies and we had lightsaber battles and we smoked weed and we had fun dancing at his place, like at dance parties at his house. And I'd never really been into dancing before. Like, my friends could never drag me to the club. But somehow Joss managed to get me to like dancing. And of course, other stuff. I had never felt this way about anyone before, and I just felt like I had to do it, you know, because I felt like I was meant to do it. But then after a few weeks of this, Joss ended it because he was afraid of hurting me, and because he was moving to London soon, and he was, you know, going through a lot with his, you know, separation, divorce thing with his ex-wife and stuff. And I was really sad, but I understood. But then after Comic-Con, we started back up again, and we were dating for the rest of the summer. And for the sake of transparency for him, I was very clear. I told him that I was a virgin, and he was very kind about it, and he never pressured me to have sex with him or anything. Although he was definitely into it. He definitely was into the idea that I was a virgin, but I also never felt like I never felt pressured to do anything with him. It was all totally consensual. And, you know, I did want to. And we went on this like fancy wine vacation in Napa Valley over Labor Day weekend, before he was set to leave for London. And I felt like it could happen then. But we were both too nervous and it just became awkward. But we still had fun and it was such a whirlwind. And I just kept saying to myself, I just need to live in the moment and enjoy this experience for what it is. But deep down, I knew for the first time in my life, I was in love. After our trip to Napa, Joss ended things and moved to London to make Age of Ultron. I was devastated, but I knew I just had to double down and focus on my job. However, the stress of being an assistant on a network TV show began getting to me, and all I could think about was how much I missed Joss and how much I wished we could be together again. We fell out of touch that fall for a while, and I began to wonder if we were even friends still. But then in December, we reconnected, and by January, I had booked tickets to visit him in London after the season 1 wrap party. However, soon a dark cloud was to be cast over everything in my life. My roommate's mom, and my roommate was like one of my best friends, still is, love her with all my heart. And her mom was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And it was just a really heavy time for her, obviously, and for me and our other roommate. And, you know, between this and my inner angst and anxiety about Joss and my growing dissatisfaction with my job, my work life really suffered and my life really suffered. I felt like I was being shut out of a promotion to writer's assistant. And more of my tasks became like personal stuff for Jed and Marissa, like on top of planning like this huge wrap party for the whole cast and crew. And I honestly had no problem doing like personal stuff for JMO, especially because of Marissa's like sensitive health, and I really wanted to do whatever I could to make her life easier and like less stressful because I really admired her and like I really wanted to support her. In fact, I was introduced to the world of Ayurveda through her, and I thought it was really interesting. But neither her nor Jed seemed to take any interest in mentoring me. And, you know, this is all the while other assistants got to like spend time in the writer's room and stuff. And as time went on, you know, I won't lie, like I started to become bitter inside, and I basically kept a countdown clock on my computer for London, waiting for the day that I was to leave. And finally, after the wrap party, which was a super amazing success in my opinion, and I think everyone else thought so too, I flew to London, and I flew with one of my closest friends as well. We basically had planned this whole vacation together. And our trip was mostly just the two of us. But as soon as I got there, I immediately went to go have dinner with Joss. And we had an amazing reunion. And it was everything I could have dreamed. Like I even had this like amazing blowout that I had gotten before I left LA. And like I arrived and it was like perfectly intact. Like everything was like going my way, and we just had an amazing night. And I lost my virginity that night, and I had never been more happy in my entire life. Plus I also got to go to Stonehenge and like be amongst the stones, which was really cool. Anyway, after my amazing trip to London, my spirits were uplifted. And on my flight home, I was, you know, thinking, okay, I have to get real. If I'm not going to be promoted on S.H.I.E.L.D., then I need to leave because Joss was set to come back that August. And I felt like maybe we could become official. And if we were to become official, I couldn't be technically his employee, even though, you know, he was never like my direct boss, but like he was still a credited executive producer on the show that I worked on. So, and there was obviously a power dynamic and stuff. And so I was like, well, if I get a new job, then there won't be that problem anymore. And so I resolved to find a way to transition to another assistant job. The next day after I got back from London, I went right into work and I scored an interview on the DL for a new assistant job. But just before I was about to leave the office that day, Jed and Marissa called me into their office and they looked really serious. And they sat me down and they said that they had decided that they were not going to ask me back for season 2. And I was so shocked. I broke down into tears. I knew things had been tense between us a little bit in the past few months, but I really thought I had redeemed myself at the wrap party. Like, I honestly didn't think, I didn't expect to get fired. Like, I was taken aback. And they said before I left that Marvel Security had to watch me like delete all of my emails from the past 2 years. And, you know, I'm just like crying and like trying not to, but like I can't help it. And I'm just like humiliated, and they leave. And then, you know, I sat there at my desk crying while this poor Marvel Security dude had to like watch me like delete these emails. It was horrible. And I sobbed in the car all the way home, and I just cried for I don't even know how long. Like, somehow my dream job had turned into a nightmare. I didn't say anything to Joss at first because I was so humiliated. But obviously, eventually he found out, and he texted me, you know, that he felt so bad, and he asked if I was okay. And I said I was, and that I would figure something out. But in reality, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had tried interviewing for several assistant jobs, but everything was a bust. I had asked Jed and Marissa why they let me go, but they didn't tell me. And I didn't know how to explain why I was leaving S.H.I.E.L.D. to potential employers. And no one wants to hire a fired assistant. And to this day, I don't know why they fired me. Some people close to me suspected that it was because they knew about me and Joss, but I can't say for certain. Anyway, one day, a couple of weeks later, I was crying to my therapist about how I fucked up my life when I realized, wait a minute. I don't even want to be a Hollywood assistant. Like, why am I crying about a job I don't even want? This is crazy. So I decided to swallow my pride and ask my dad for financial assistance while I worked on my own writing for a little while. A TV pilot script that I had been kind of outlining while I was working on S.H.I.E.L.D., but I just didn't have time to write it because I was so busy with other stuff. And it was a pilot that was inspired by my love of tarot, because I was really into tarot at the time. And my dad and I didn't really have a close relationship at this time, but I think that he was impressed by my entrepreneurial spirit and was like, okay, you have 6 months. And I was like, sweet, very grateful. So I was like, okay, I have to like hit the ground running here. And so I immediately began powering through writing a draft of this script that I had been planning. And a week or so later, I was about to walk into my therapist's office. Again, was in a lot of therapy at this time. And I got a text from Joss, and I texted him back. I was like, hey dude, like, you want to come over and sit here and just watch me meet my deadline of my own for my script, like kind of, you know, referencing the beginning of it all. And he laughed and was like, hey, you know, I'm so sorry I can't make it today, but if you want to come over, fly out tonight and I'll pay your way because we're on bank holiday this weekend. And I was like, what? And I walked right into my therapist's office and I was like, Joss wants to fly me to London tonight. And she's like, what are you doing here then? And I was like, permission granted. And I like left immediately and drove all the way home and packed a bag. And the next thing I knew, I was on a flight to London, and I spent 5 days, I think it was like 5 days there, chilling at his place and working on my script, and we were having a lot of fun. And he told me that when he got back to the States, that he wanted to keep seeing me. And I was so over the moon. I was like, oh my gosh, like at least this is working out, like something in my life, like thing that I care about the most. Like August couldn't come fast enough. Upon my return from London, I finished the first draft of my script, and I was about to begin rewrites when things took a really dark turn. My roommate's mom was in failing health from brain cancer still, and one day she called me up out of the blue from her job and asked me to come with her to Fresno because her mom had taken a turn for the worse. And I said, of course, and I dropped everything and went to Fresno immediately, like didn't even pack a bag or anything. We just drove right there. And our other roommate also came up for a part of this, since we were like ride or die together as like 3 roommates. And I won't really get into this all that much because that's more her story than my story. Actually, she did turn the whole thing into an amazing one-woman comedy show. But at the time, it was not funny that much. It was very challenging and depressing. And I had never seen anyone die before. And I felt so horrible for my best friend. And she went through so much. And I did my best to show up for her, you know, as a friend, in any way I could, as moral support and stuff. But I was also still pretty depressed about my own life, too. And like, I really didn't know what my future was going to hold. And everything was on pause. You know, it just kind of felt like I was walking in just molasses. And, you know, but I tried to hide my own stuff because it seemed to like pale in comparison to what she was going through. The best part about that summer was that Joss and I were still texting all the time. And honestly, it was his support and texts that helped me get through all that stuff. And more than ever, I just couldn't wait for him to get back to the States. After what felt like the slowest and most depressing July of all time, August rolled around, and a week after my roommate's mom's memorial service, I was basically bedridden with anxiety and depression about everything. My script rewrites were basically collecting dust for months, and I had like no energy to even move. My 6 months was soon to be up, and I had no idea what I was doing with my life. But worst of all, Joss had just gotten back to the US, but he was acting really distant towards me over text. I felt so on edge, like I was about to snap like a twig at any moment. And finally, one day in late August, I got an email from Joss, and he said basically that he couldn't have a girlfriend. And it felt like my heart like was ripped out of my chest. The pain was so extreme, like physically, emotionally. I like plunged into like the darkest time of my life. I was like hurtling towards rock bottom, like at warp speed. And on my way there, I like read every book on psychology. Like I was like, I need a master's degree. And you know, I wasn't eating. I wasn't leaving my room except to like drive to see my therapist. And, you know, I was mostly just like sleeping and crying and like realizing how psychologically fucked up I was. And, my friends were like so worried about me. Like they basically had to drag me out to like eat and like do basic things and like get fresh air and stuff. Like they really, they really were there for me. And meanwhile, I had a really huge falling out with my mom over everything about this, and because I had told her, and I just didn't feel like, I don't want to throw her under the bus, but at the time I didn't feel very supported by her. And by early September, I felt like my dreams were dead and that I had nothing left to live for, and that I had ruined my life and that my life was basically over. Then, one night, September 11th, 2014, I got up to go to the bathroom because I started to feel nauseous and I was having all these epiphanies about my life and I was just feeling off. I dry heaved into the toilet, and when I got up, I started to see like the whole world was like acting weird, like it was visually like warped. And I thought maybe I should text my therapist, but before I could do so, she texted me. And I thought it was so weird because like she never texted me, but she was like, "Hey, I feel like I should text you, like, are you doing okay?" And I was like, honestly, something really weird is going on. I don't know what it is. And I like went back to my bed, and it's like I could feel the darkness closing in on me. And then I was gone. It was like I was dead. And then I was blasted open. I saw everything. I saw how we were all one. I saw how it's all love. And I felt it in every fiber of my being. Because I was it, and it was the truth. I can't even really describe this experience, honestly. You can't use words for this. And I didn't have any words for it at the time either. And I don't know how long I was in it for, maybe 1 minute, maybe 10 minutes. Not overly long. But by the time I came to, I knew. Everything that happened between me and Joss happened for a reason. And while I had no idea what that reason was, in that moment, I realized this wasn't the end of my story. It was only just beginning.